You've got about 500 bucks and you want to grab a handheld gaming console. But which one should you grab? In today's video, we find out. 5 years ago, I co-founded a sock company called APTHCRY, and I haven't really talked about it at all on this channel. I've actually mainly only talked about it on my sneaker channel because I figured sneakerheads need socks. But then I realized, so do people who like tech. Very dumb that I didn't talk about it over here because people who love tech also love socks that are comfy and look amazing. My bad, I'm sorry about keeping the secret of incredible socks away from you guys, but now you can try them for yourself. So like I said, 5 years ago, I co-founded a sock company and we make the world's most comfy socks. And yeah, you might be saying to yourself, you're biased because you made the sock company, but seriously, they're crazy comfy. Our socks use a proprietary knit technology called IsoWeave, which are actually these little triangles right here, which not only help the socks breathe incredibly well, but it makes them fit better on your feet and also even more comfortable because the top is soft and stretchy and the bottom is padded and comfy. In fact, you can see it really well in these socks from our upcoming golf collection, which actually drops next week. Speaking of this collection, we drop limited collections and colors all the time. In fact, almost every single week. So if you want a pair of socks that is incredibly unique to match, well, whether it's the sneakers in your collection or maybe the outfit that you want to wear that day or whatever the case may be, check out APTHCRY.com because we have some of the wildest and most interesting socks out there. And when I say wild, I don't mean a pair of socks that has like an emoji on it or something like that, although we have done a pair of socks inspired by the sock emoji. I'm talking about beautiful designs that are woven directly into the socks so they're not going to wash off or anything like that, inspired by many different things and many different capsules which we've dropped over the years. And it doesn't matter if you grab our ankle length socks or our mid length socks or even our crew length socks, which come in the limited designs and just standard colors depending on what you want. All of our socks are incredibly comfortable and feel amazing on foot. And because I waited so long to tell you guys about the best socks ever, I feel like I owe you guys something, so I'm gonna give you guys $10 off of your first purchase. Unique to this YouTube channel, Tech Fowler. All you need to do is either click the link in the top of the description below, scan the QR code on your screen, or just use the words Tech Fowler at checkout and you get $10 off of your first purchase. So if you've been looking to upgrade your sock drawer with the most comfortable socks out there that match pretty much everything that you want to wear, and of course all of the sneakers in your collection, make sure to check out APTHCRY through the links in the description below and use code TechFowler for $10 off of your first purchase. Check us out on APTHCRY.com, and thank you so much for supporting my business. I really appreciate it. So when it comes to the around $500 price point, there are two handhelds that really stand out: the brand new Nintendo Switch 2 and the Steam Deck OLED. Now to be fair, you don't have to just grab the Steam Deck OLED or the Nintendo Switch 2. There are tons of other handhelds you can grab and tons of different price points. Things like the PlayStation Portal, which technically you need a PS5 for, but it's only 200 bucks, or the Asus ROG Ally X, which is like a $600 to $700 console, or even the Lenovo Legion Go S, or possibly the 2 coming out, which of course is also a more expensive handheld, and you can even grab the Nintendo Switch 1. But in my opinion, even though there are a ton of great options out there, the two best value options and also the two most popular options are of course the Steam Deck and the Nintendo Switch 2. So in today's video, I'm gonna break down all of the pros and cons of each of these handhelds and find out which one is right for you. And because I've already sort of mentioned the price range for both of these handhelds, let's first talk about price. The Nintendo Switch 2 comes in two different packages or bundles. You've got the standard Nintendo Switch 2 console, which comes in at 450 bucks, or the Mario Kart World bundle, which comes in at $499. It's a very new handheld, so there really aren't a lot of options out there for you, but if you want just the base level Nintendo Switch 2, 450 bucks is your buy-in. Now when it comes to the Steam Deck, because this handheld has been out for a couple years at this point, there are a lot of options out there. The first is the standard Steam Deck, the non-OLED model, and currently you can buy that brand new for $399 bucks. However, if you want to upgrade to the better OLED screen model of the Steam Deck, it is going to cost you a little bit more. Rather than being $400, it's going to start at $550 or $549. You can also upgrade the internal storage and get, I believe, the 1 terabyte version for $649. So yes, technically the Steam Deck OLED is more expensive, but realistically, if you're just purely going for price, you could probably find a used Steam Deck OLED for cheaper than the Nintendo Switch 2. But hey, if we're going purely off of base retail price, and if you're only comparing the Steam Deck OLED, which I do think is the better model, then yeah, in that case, the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to win because it's $100 cheaper. However, it's not very easy to find in stores right now, and there is the non-OLED version, which is a pretty similar device for $400, which is $50 cheaper than the cheapest Nintendo Switch 2. So it's all kind of pretty similar. They're all around that $500 price point. It's tough to recommend one based on price. Now, one of the biggest reasons that people decide to go with handhelds over just playing games on their PC or playing a console on their TV is portability. So why don't we talk about the portability and comfort of both of these devices. Starting off with the Steam Deck and Steam Deck OLED, it's a very, very light device, and you've also got these really nice hand grips on the back, which make it very comfortable in your hand. It is definitely wider than the Nintendo Switch 2, and that might be something that you notice both in hand and also when you actually need to throw it in a backpack to travel. Both of these devices I would recommend getting carrying cases for so they don't get scratched up in your bags. However, for the Steam Deck, it's going to be a much bigger case because it's a wider device. And while yes, these hand grips do make this a much more comfortable console in hand than the Nintendo Switch 2, it does make it harder to travel with because it's a significantly thicker device as well. That said, when it comes to ergonomics, the Steam Deck is just just incredible in the hand. It's one of the most comfortable consoles out there. While yes, I do kind of prefer the Lenovo Legion Go S, to be fair, this is very, very close to that, and it's also cheaper, and I do think it's significantly more comfortable in the hand than the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, the reason I say that is because the Nintendo Switch 2 trades off some of the in-hand comfort for portability. It is a very flat handheld. Yes, you do have these triggers kind of hanging off the back of the device, but generally it's a very thin and flat device, pretty similar to a tablet. Plus, you can remove the controllers, which means that you can make it even more portable if you just want to throw this in your bag and then throw this in maybe a different bag. I don't know why you do that, but you could if you wanted to. Now, while yes, I do definitely prefer the way that the Steam Deck OLED feels in your hand because of the grips that it has on the back, or I guess the palm rest that you have on the back, the Nintendo Switch 2 is not an uncomfortable console. It's very easy to hold. It doesn't get too difficult to hold after long play sessions, and because this console is bigger than the original Nintendo Switch, it does feel better in medium to large hands like my hands. I have pretty medium-sized hands, and it feels a lot better, especially when you're playing games like this. Even though the Steam Deck OLED is a larger device overall, it still weighs almost exactly the same, and honestly, it might even be a little lighter. But they're both very light devices, so that probably shouldn't affect your decision too much. So if I had to break down the things that we just talked about, the portability and comfort, into two separate categories, I would say that the Steam Deck OLED is more comfortable, but the Nintendo Switch 2 is more portable. But now let's talk about controls and versatility. The Steam Deck OLED is absolutely an incredible device. It is literally a PC in your hand. While no, it's not as powerful as your PC, it is still very, very powerful, especially for a handheld, and it can play all of your Steam games, or almost all of your Steam games. So if you're playing a game on your PC and you decide you need to go to France over the weekend, you can literally just bring your Steam Deck and play the same exact game from the same exact save point on your handheld device. It is very cool, and compared to all the other PC handhelds out there, like the Asus ROG Ally X, it's probably the easiest to use. And that's mainly because of SteamOS. While no, SteamOS is not the most compatible PC operating system, it's essentially a skin on top of Linux, it still runs all of your Steam games, which is most of my games, incredibly well. When it comes to the actual buttons and button layout, it's pretty similar to a standard controller. You've got triggers, you've got shoulder buttons, you've got face buttons, you've got a D-pad, you've got joysticks. Now, one thing that does separate this device from other handheld devices is that you've got these two very large touchpads off to either side of the screen, which are amazing for playing RTS games. Not only that, it's a touchscreen, so you've got a whole nother input method right there. Another nice input that you've got on the Steam Deck are these 4 rear buttons or paddles that are customizable, that you can set to whatever you want. So if you want to play like a shooter and maybe have your reload button or your grenade button or whatever kind of set back here, you can do that as well. Now, getting into the Switch 2, let's start things off with the buttons first, because we just talked about that with the Steam Deck. When it comes to the actual buttons themselves, you've got less on the Switch 2 than you've got on the Steam Deck. It has most of the buttons of the Steam Deck. You've got face buttons, you've got a D-pad that's sort of split up into face buttons, so if you want to split up the controllers and play with your friends or whatever, you can do that. You've got joysticks, you do have, of course, home buttons, which you do also have in the Steam Deck. You've got shoulder buttons, you've got triggers. It's a very traditional button layout. There are no touchpads, but you do, of course, have a touch screen like the Steam Deck. And on the actual console itself, although you can buy controllers with this, you don't have customizable back paddles. Now, obviously, the Nintendo Switch 2 does have a party trick, which is, of course, the removable controllers on the sides of the device. This, of course, is the whole reason the console is called the Nintendo Switch, because it can switch between handheld mode and docked mode and even tabletop mode. There's tons of different ways to play. And even though you might not have as many physical buttons as something like the Steam Deck, it does have more ways to play. The 2 controllers that you pull off the sides of the device can, of course, be used as individual controllers or as motion-sensitive controllers or wands or Wiimotes or whatever you want to call them. Not only that, the Nintendo Switch 2 controllers now have this new mouse feature, which means you can set it on a table and use it as a mouse, which is pretty cool. Not something that I think a lot of people will do, but you can do it. And even if you just have one Nintendo Switch console, you can play with 2 players, because you can either play this in handheld mode like this, or if you want to play with maybe your wife, your girlfriend, your sister, your brother, whoever, you can pull off the 2 controllers and play them like this. All of this you probably know. Nintendo Switches are not new. They came out in 2017, I think was the first Nintendo Switch. Now we've got the Nintendo Switch 2, which is just kind of an upgrade on the original. So while sure, the Steam Deck might win on the actual amount of buttons that you get, the Nintendo Switch 2 absolutely wins on versatility of controls and the amount of ways that you can play. But let's go back to talking about games really quick, because we kind of covered what the Steam Deck can do in terms of games. You can play Steam games. You can also install other launchers and play other games, but you know, there's some restrictions there, like some games have anti-cheat that you can't run on the software, that you can only run on Windows handhelds, so that's something to keep in mind. The Nintendo Switch 2, like a regular console, gets regular console games. You get Nintendo exclusives, and you can play whatever games are released on the Nintendo Switch 2. There will be no compatibility issues. Not only that, I'm pretty sure you can play all of your Nintendo Switch 1 games on this handheld as well, plus you can play a bunch of retro games that you can find in the retro store. So while sure, on the Steam Deck you can play your entire Steam library, which probably at this point is pretty huge, the Nintendo Switch 2 is no slouch in the game department. There are thousands of games you can play on this handheld, even though it's brand new. Now, in terms of actual Nintendo Switch 2 optimized games, there are fewer. You've got Mario Kart World, which is purely built for the Nintendo Switch 2. As of the time of me recording this video, Donkey Kong Bonanza just came out. I haven't had a chance to play it yet, but it's downloaded. You've got Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 and 4, and then you've got some other games that can be optimized for the Switch 2, like, of course, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Mario Party Jamboree. There is a small but reasonable amount of both new Switch 2 games and Switch 2 optimized games. And I shouldn't say this at this point in the video, Nintendo because I feel like this really is the main determining factor, but realistically, when it comes to buying one of these two handhelds, I feel like most people probably already know which way that they're leaning, even if they don't want to admit it, because they know what games they want to play. If you like Nintendo games and you want to play Nintendo exclusive games, the only way to do that is to get a Switch 2. If you want to play your PC library and all the games that you have on your PC, then go Steam Deck. Interestingly enough, for one of my, I hate to say it, but one of my most anticipated games, I know the game sucks, but I play it every year. Madden 26. Yes, you can play it on the PC. There is an anti-cheat though, and because of the anti-cheat, you cannot play it on the Steam Deck. However, even though we haven't had Madden on the Switch in a very long time, if ever, they are releasing it on the Switch 2. Now, one thing I should kind of mention, although it's kind of like comparing apples to oranges, is the power of these two devices. The Steam Deck OLED came out a couple years ago. Even then, it was relatively underpowered. It's still a pretty powerful device for what it is, but compared to some of the other gaming PC handhelds on the market, it's relatively underpowered. The Nintendo Switch 2, while yes, way more powerful than the Switch 1, still lags behind the PS5 and the Xbox Series S. Nintendo doesn't ever really try and win the graphics game. They try and go with games that are fun and that work well on their handhelds. Like, they optimize their games for their handhelds, they look great on their handhelds, and when you're comparing a game like Cyberpunk on the Nintendo Switch 2, which to be fair, it does look amazing, to Cyberpunk on, say, the PS5 or a PC, obviously those are gonna look better than this, but it's still pretty impressive what the Switch 2 can do. And interestingly enough, when you compare something like Cyberpunk on the Nintendo Switch 2 to the Steam Deck, I actually think it looks way better on the Switch 2, even though the screen is nicer on the Steam Deck. So while no, I don't know for sure which one is technically the more powerful, my guess would be that the Nintendo Switch 2 is the more powerful from a purely consumer point of view who's played these handhelds for the last month and a half. I mean, I've had this for years, but I played this one for the last like month and a half. And I would say that the Nintendo Switch 2 definitely seems more powerful overall. But yes, now let's talk about the screen. Now, unfortunately, the one sort of downgrade from the Nintendo Switch 1 OLED to the Nintendo Switch 2 was the screen. OLED screens are absolutely amazing. The blacks are incredibly true, the contrast is incredible, and they just look amazing. Especially when you've got sort of an anti-reflective screen like this device has, it's gonna look amazing. The Nintendo Switch 2, unfortunately, went back from the OLED display to the LCD display, probably because of pricing, but who knows. That being said, the LCD display does look incredible. Now, obviously, the black won't be as true on the Nintendo Switch 2 as it is on the Steam Deck, but it's pretty close. Not only that, the resolution on the Switch 2 is higher than the resolution on the Steam Deck OLED, which means, of course, that the Nintendo Switch 2 is sharper. Plus, because it's not an OLED display, it can get brighter. So it's brighter and it's sharper, and the black and the color contrast actually looks almost as good as the OLED. So while this is not an OLED display, it still looks really good. So as much as I personally prefer OLED technology to LCD technology when it comes to actually looking at a display, the Nintendo Switch 2's display is punching above its weight. It's a pretty incredible display, and I think you'll be happy with either one. What'll really be amazing is when Nintendo decides to come out with an OLED version of the Switch 2. That's gonna look crazy, but we'll have to wait for that one. I can't really pick a clear winner when it comes to display. They're a lot closer than I would have thought for different reasons. I wanna say the Steam Deck because, I mean, the colors look really good, but looking at this display, it also looks amazing and it's sharper. I think I might have to go Switch 2. Both of these handhelds come with modern connectivity options. They both have Wi-Fi 6, although the Steam Deck OLED has Wi-Fi 6E, which is slightly better. They both have Bluetooth. The Switch 2 actually has 2 USB-C ports, although I believe the Steam Deck does have a more capable USB-C port. I need to double check that, but I'm pretty sure it does. That being said, the Switch 2, you can plug into your dock. It'll actually perform a little bit better because you get constant power to the device, and the dock comes with an Ethernet port. So if you want a wired Ethernet connection for a faster internet connection than Wi-Fi 6E, you can just dock this, which you get in the box, and you get a really fast internet connection. So while yes, the Wi-Fi is better on the Steam Deck OLED, you can technically get faster speeds on the Switch. And honestly, when it comes to quality of life, I do prefer having 2 USB-C ports because you could maybe plug in a camera to the top and power into the bottom, or you could plug power into either side depending on how you're sitting. It gives you a lot of versatility, which I like. Steam Deck only has USB-C on the top, which is fine. Doesn't bother me too much, but if you wanted to dock it, which you can buy Steam Deck docks, you do have to plug something into the top. Now, when it comes to expandable storage, they both come with micro SD slots. However, the Nintendo Switch 2 requires micro SD Express, which is actually a much faster kind of memory, so games do load faster off of the SD cards on the Switch 2 than on the Steam Deck. So while yes, they both take micro SD cards, the Nintendo Switch 2 can only take micro SD Express, which is honestly better, but it's more expensive. Honestly, both of these handhelds are great. They're both excellent, and you won't regret getting either one. That being said, they also both excel in different areas, and they're both great at pretty much everything that they do. It really depends on what you're looking for when it comes to games. The screens are both great. They both play games really well and seamlessly with the games that they're compatible with. Controls are excellent on both devices. Obviously, you know, you can prefer one way of play versus another, but that's really up to you. When it comes to battery, I would say that the Steam Deck OLED does seem to have an edge over the Nintendo Switch 2, at least from what I can tell. Playing games like Cyberpunk, I got like 2 hours out of the Nintendo Switch 2 and like 2.5 to 3 out of the Steam Deck OLED. I do think that the Steam Deck OLED does have a slightly better battery, but that's just from my own personal testing. But realistically, I mean, you're gonna need to bring a battery pack with either one if you're going on a long flight. That's just how it is. I gotta say it again, both handhelds are great. It really does come down to the games you wanna play. If you wanna play PC games by yourself, the Steam Deck OLED's the way to go. If you wanna play Nintendo games games, could be by yourself or with a bunch of friends, then the Nintendo Switch 2 is the way to go. There are definitely a lot more ways to play multiplayer games on the Switch 2 than the Steam Deck. I would say that the Switch 2 is built for multiplayer. The Steam Deck is not at all. So if you want to buy one of these consoles for like your kids, obviously the Switch 2 is the way to go, not only because the games are probably more kid-friendly, but also because you can play with multiple people. The Steam Deck is great for like that PC gamer who wants to take games with them on the road, or maybe doesn't have a PC and wants to play like the newest, I don't know, Doom or something. Now when it comes to me personally, as someone who likes PC gaming, but definitely leans more console gaming, I probably would get the Nintendo Switch 2 over the Steam Deck. I play a lot of games with my wife, and those games tend to be like Mario Party or Mario Kart. And for me, it's really nice that the Nintendo Switch 2 is now capable enough to play games like Cyberpunk or Madden. That really kind of takes it across the finish line for me. Like the fact that I can play Nintendo games and more hardcore games, not all of them, but more of them. For me, this is a console that I would really lean on, the one that I'd play the most. And it's been the handheld that I've traveled with the most. I actually have traveled with both, but I end up playing this one a lot more than this one. That being said, the Steam Deck's great, and I mainly play all of my PC games on the Steam Deck or one of my other PC handhelds, not even on my computer anymore. So again, you can't go wrong with either. Think about what games you want to play and then make a decision based on that. But hey, that pretty much wraps up the video. Let me know in the comment section down below which handheld you would grab or which one you have grabbed in the comment section down below. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll see you all in the next one.